who has been pastoring all across the northern tier with her husband. First of all, let's welcome Mary Jo Norton. Mary Jo and Bill are, Mary Jo is a commissioned lay pastor. She is in Superior and has done a superior job, quite honestly. She has grown a very small town church, and they now have a children's program. They have an adult Bible study. They're going to be having a children's Christmas program. Thank you. And a Christmas children's program for the first time in 16 years. So I'm really excited for Mary Jo because she and her husband have been pastoring for quite some time up in the northern tier, and it's a godsend for the people up there. And I've known Bill quite some time. Mary Jo and her husband live in Minnesota. On Sundays, they drive 46 miles down to Superior. They drop off Mary Jo, and Mary Jo gets dropped off, and Bill goes another 24 miles onto Globe. Onto Globe. So they do a little bit of driving on Sundays, but I think Mary Jo has gotten some real special recognition recently because she has been the presbytery's ambassador to this presbytery, to the churches, and has really received some accolades for her work in the area of sexual misconduct. It's not just sexual misconduct, as I found out this morning. There are harassment policies, there are hazing policies even. And if you don't think this area runs rampant, check out the national scene these days. You might have heard something on the news recently that seems to reach as far as the office of the President of the United States. So without further ado, and we will take breaks occasionally, lunch will be served, it's Baggins, so that if any of you are staying for Frank Whiting's service, there will be lunch and plenty of it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of my wonderful colleagues, Mary Jo Norton.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming today. My husband and I have been in churches as large as 2,000, and as I said, as small as the church I'm serving in, that started out with 14. So we've had this wide range of experiences all over the country. We've been in 5 different presbyteries as we have moved. My husband's job before he was a pastor took us all over the nation. And so we got to go to a lot of different places, a lot of different churches, and meet a lot of people and hear their stories. We have a scripture passage that I'd like to use, which is Exodus 22. Do not mistreat or oppress the foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. And Matthew 19:14, Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And Luke 9, an argument started among the disciples as to which of them was the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and had him stand beside him. Then he said to them, whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you all who is greatest. So let's open with prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. So why do I do this? It's not fun and it's not pretty, and it certainly is the ugly side of humanity. But I do it in part to be part of the saving side. the part that helps out. I've given presentations to over 50 churches now, and more civil and community groups as well. I do it because of people that I've known in our ministry. Bob, who was a youth pastor, who abused, even inside the church, in his church office, preteen boys. We saw some things that we were uncomfortable with, and people didn't do anything. There were background checks, there were reporting things, but we watched looking back, conditioning, and grooming that happened. I do it because of Kelly, the girl who, when we went to sing at her house Christmas carols, her mom's boyfriend was watching porn on the TV, and one of the youth leaders stood there in front of the TV set like this, so the children were not seeing that. That same girl came and told my daughter that she had put a lock on her door because mom's boyfriend kept coming in. I do it because of Kevin, who didn't say he was abused, but when all the news about the youth pastor Bob broke, he had suicidal thoughts, and his grades plummeted. I do it because of Dave, who became extremely suicidal. And when the news broke and he heard it, he broke into the church, into the pastor's office, to see if there was anything in there. His parents got him to a psychiatrist. He's a healthy, happy young man now. I do it because of Tony, a man in his mid-30s who came and wanted to work with the kids right away. And he would say to me, "Oh, Mom, don't worry about it. Oh, Mom, it's okay." He would give kids extravagant gifts, things that their parents, if you ever had somebody give your kid a case of high caffeine soda as a parent, you know something's wrong here. I do it because of a woman in my training session once that said her daughter had been talking to her about how uncomfortable she was with a lot of the things happening in her youth group, and now she understood why. I do it because of the number of people that come up to me after I give these presentations and say, "It happened to me too." Now, we're required to attend sexual abuse prevention training every year. If you're a pastor, it's a requirement in our presbytery. Let's face it, that's why most of you are here. You got a nice little email that said, "You must attend," right? It's a requirement. And you've been there and you've done that and you've sat through a lot of training sessions before. I hear that a lot too, especially if I'm giving to a group of teachers who have to have presentations as well. But why are we here? We're here because we're concerned about protecting children and the adults who work with them. We want to provide information and statistics on the incidences of abuse. We want to heighten awareness for volunteers and the church at large. We have a history in all the churches of involvement with child advocacy and abuse issues, and we need to be specific on some of the things we study. There are realities in child abuse today. We are a litigious society. We need to be aware of that in our churches as well. So what is abuse? Who are abusers? What's the impact of abuse on lives of children? And what do you do if you suspect a child's been abused? What do you do when a child report has to be done? We have to understand what the law is in this state. So we're going to take a quiz. Did you know you're going to have a quiz this morning? So first of all, what you don't know can hurt you. We hear about child abuse in the news all the time, but how much do we really know about it? 3 children die of child abuse in the home in the United States each day. How many people report child abuse when faced with an actual situation? 1/3. What is the single leading cause of death for children ages 4 and younger? Child abuse and neglect. On average, child abuse is reported somewhere in the United States every 10 seconds. Strangers pose the greatest risk of sexual abuse to children.
False.
False. Most children are abused by people they know. Yeah. Child molesters get their sexual gratification only from children. False. Many child molesters also have adult sexual relationships. The average age that child molesters first attack a child is when the attackers, are in their teens, even as young as age 12. Which of the following actions can help stop child abuse and neglect? All of the above. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information on a lot of different kinds of abuse because they're all linked together. We tend to not think of it that way, but they really are. And as we create and review our church policies and procedures, and as we deal with our church and our communities, we need to have all these issues in mind. So what is abuse? I was speaking to a session about mandatory reporting, and one of the members said to me, I want to report a family for not vaccinating their kids. And oh, by the way, the kids were vaccinated. But it's important that the people who are mandated reporters know what they're supposed to be reporting. First of all, there's physical abuse. Physical abuse of a child, and these work with adults too. When I'm using child here, but it happens to adults as well, so please hear that. Physical abuse of a child is when a parent or caregiver causes any non-accidental physical injury to a child. There are many signs of physical abuse, and so we need to be aware of those signs of physical abuse: bruises, unexplained injuries, how the child acts, behaviors. You know, if a kid has one purple mark on their arm, okay. If they have a purple mark, a green mark, and a yellow mark, maybe pay attention to that. They're in there. 28.3% of adults report being physically abused as a child. That's over a quarter of the people who are adults right now. How many people are in your church? 28%. Think about that. Sexual abuse. Oh, I'm sorry, slide 19. Physical abuse is kicking, striking, burning, biting, hair pulling, choking, throwing, shoving, whipping, or any other action that injures a child. Even if the caregiver didn't mean to cause injury, when a child is injured, it's abuse. Physical discipline from a parent that does not injure or impair a child is not considered abuse. However, nonviolent alternatives are always available. So there's a difference between somebody paddling them on the bottom and somebody drawing blood, bruising. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse occurs when an adult uses a child for sexual purposes or involves a child in sexual acts. It also includes a child that might be older or more powerful using a child for sexual gratification or excitement. It's not unusual to the 10 or 11 or 12-year-old who's getting abused by an adult at home to do something to younger brothers and sisters or neighbors. Sexual abuse of children can be non-contact abuse. They don't have to touch to have it be abuse. It could be making a child view a sex act, making a child view or show sex organs, inappropriate sexual talk, contact abuse, fondling or oral sex, penetration, making the child perform a sex act, exploitation, child prostitution, and child pornography. I've heard a lot of those things on the news. As you can see, it's adults as well as children that get abused. Emotional abuse. When a parent or caregiver harms a child's mental and social development or causes severe emotional harm, it's considered emotional abuse. While a single incident of a parent losing their temper and saying something isn't considered abuse, most often emotional abuse is a pattern that happens over and over and over, and that is what causes damage over time. You tell a kid every single day of their life they're worthless, they're going to think they're worthless. Emotional abuse might be rejecting or ignoring the child, telling them they're unwanted or unloved, showing little interest in the child, not initiating or returning affection, not listening to the child, not validating a child's feelings, breaking promises, cutting the child off in conversation. They might be shaming or humiliating, calling the child names, criticizing, belittling, demeaning, berating, mocking, using language, or taking action that takes aims at the child's feelings of self-worth. Again, you're no good. You dummy. You hear that over and over, and that's what people think. Terrorizing. They might accuse them, blame them, insult them, punish them, or threaten that they'll ban them. They might threaten with harm or death even, setting the child up for failure, manipulating them, taking advantage of the child's weakness or reliance on adults, slandering, screaming, yelling. You know, your grades are no good, but you don't give them any place to study, and you have a party going on in the house all the time, so they can't ever study, but those kinds of things happen. Isolating, keeping the child from peers and positive activities, confining the child to a small area, forbidding play or other stimulating experiences, and corrupting, engaging the child in criminal acts, telling lies to justify actions or ideas, and encouraging misbehavior. We will see that often when the parent uses the child to do shoplifting, to do stealing, to do those kinds of things. Child neglect can also be an issue. It's when a parent or caregiver does not give care, supervision, affection, or support needed for the child's health, safety, and well-being. Things that are child neglect might be the physical neglect and inadequate supervision, emotional neglect, medical neglect, and educational neglect. Physical neglect. Kids need enough care to be healthy and enough supervision to be safe. Adults that care for children have to provide clothing for them, food, shelter, drink. They need a safe, healthy place to live and adequate supervision. If you are raising your kid in a meth lab, that's probably not a really good idea. Emotional neglect. Children require enough affection and attention to feel loved and supported. If a child shows signs of psychological illness, it should be treated. Medical neglect. Some states don't prosecute parents for withholding certain kinds of medical care for religious reasons. Sometimes vaccinations fall into that. But they usually have a court order if something is drastic. If the child has got a broken arm and parents are not taking them to the doctor, that's a problem. They have to provide basic preventative care. You know, if the kid has been sick and sick and sick and sick and sick, and they won't do anything, any kind of care. They won't take them to the emergency room. They will go see the home health nurse. They will put even the nurse at the school, those kinds of things. Educational neglect. We live in a country where we have schools that are free to go to. But parents need to be responsible while making sure their kids attend school and that they have access for academic success. There's no smoking gun for child neglect. It isn't like, oh, I can see that one. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's kind of clear. But a lot of times neglect isn't quite as clear to see. Even one instance of neglect can cause a problem. I was raised with a foster brother, and he told me that for the first 6 months he lived in our home, he got up in the middle of the night, every single night, and ate everything he could possibly eat out of the refrigerator. He said, after about 6 months, I realized Mom was always going to have food in the refrigerator, and I was never going to be hungry again. We see that often when we work with homeless shelters. If you put out sandwiches, they'll take as many sandwiches as they can because they don't know when the next meal's coming from. Kids in school will maybe take somebody else's lunch. They'll get food out of the garbage can when they're hungry. These are things that we start to see and recognize there's a real problem. Caregivers sometimes show some signs that we can look at too. There's signs in all kinds of abuse, but in neglect, we can see certain indicators that happen. They might be indifferent or lack of care about a child. Now, there are poverty parents that are doing an absolutely great job raising their kids. They really are. Their kids might have patches on their clothes, but they are there for their kids. But there are also parents who couldn't care less. They don't know where the kid is. They don't know what's going on. The parent might be suffering from depression or apathy. Usually drug and alcohol abuse play a part in this, and sometimes mental issues play a part in it. They deny that there's any kind of a problem. Oh, they're all right. They're just, they're a bad kid, they're stealing the lunches out of the other kids' lockers. Right? They view the child negatively. There's no warmth. That kid is a thorn in my side. They rely on the child for their own care and well-being. When you start seeing the 8-year-old who's taking care of their little brothers and sisters all the time, when they're making the meals, when they're trying to figure out how to put food on the table, that's a problem. And there are signs we can look for in a child as well. And it doesn't mean it's always cause for alarm, but it is reason to take a second look at it when you see it. Clothing might be the wrong size, or it's in disrepair, or dirty, or not right for the weather. I remember I was taking my youth group, I was in a much larger church, and I had 35 kids I was taking to California Mountains for youth group camp, and one of the kids showed up in shorts and a t-shirt. No sweatshirt, no long pants, flip-flops, no shoes. We raided the lost and found bin and got enough clothes to take care of this child. Those kinds of things happen though, and we need to be aware of that. A lot of times they're hungry and they stockpile food, they seek food, they might even show signs of malnutrition. Watch for the bleeding gums, watch for the distended belly maybe. They're always hungry. Or maybe they've gotten to the point that they aren't hungry anymore. They're tired, they're sleepy, they're listless. There's hygiene problems and body odor. I don't know about you, one of my favorite things to do is to contribute to schools. And we have this wonderful tax credit in Arizona. I'm going to put a plug in for that at the end of the year. And you can give to a school for anything. And one of the schools I gave to last year wanted a washer and dryer. Because the kids come to school and they don't have a way of washing and drying their clothes. And so they were able to get some uniforms for kids so they could come in and bring clothes and wash them during the day, pick them up and go home. Sometimes it might be doing a backpack program. I've been involved with churches that do that too, where Friday afternoons the kids just quietly go up and grab a backpack filled with food for the weekend and take it home. There's stuff that we can do that's simple and easy, and we need to be aware of who needs it though. They might talk about taking care of their younger brothers and sisters, or they don't know where mom and dad are. The parents didn't come home last night. They don't know where they are. They might have untreated medical and dental problems, incomplete immunizations, not because the parent is protesting, but because they just haven't taken care of it. There might be truancy, frequently incomplete homework, and frequent changes of schools. Because once a school starts asking questions, they move to a different school. Something we don't think about a lot, and we should, especially here in Arizona, where it is rampant, is sex trafficking. Did you know sex trafficking is rampant here? It's male and female both, although 80% of it is female. The average age is 11 to 14. Many run away from middle-class homes. They might be a runaway or thrown away, or they're a homeless child that needs a shelter. And they're willing to do what it takes to get shelter and food. In larger cities, especially where there are conventions, this is rampant. They will bring children into cities where there are huge conventions or things like the Super Bowl for all the people that are coming. What happens in the city where nobody knows me stays in that city, right? So people come to a strange city and indulge in all the things they wouldn't be caught dead doing at home in their own neighborhood. There's a new trend that's happening, and that means that the kids are being trafficked, but they go home to their own house at night. They are being pressured for a lot of different reasons, and they go home at night. They're usually led into this by someone older, and it's usually a boyfriend. It can be related to gang initiation. There are 5,000 children that die every single year in the United States because of sex trafficking. The life expectancy once you're involved is 7 years. 7 years. Illegal trafficking has surpassed the sale of illegal drugs. When you sell an illegal drug, the drug is gone. You don't make any more money on it. When you sell a child, you can sell that child over and over and over again. It's a $32 billion a year industry. It's on the rise, and it's in all 50 states. 4.5 million of trafficking persons are sexually exploited. These are U.S. numbers. This isn't someplace down around the world. This is right here in the U.S. And up to 300,000 Americans under 18 are lured into the commercial sex trade a year. They think they've watched Pretty Woman, right? You're going to get, you'll fall in love, right? And get rich, marry the rich guy. Doesn't work out that way. So statistics. I love math. I would not give anything without having math involved, right? 2015 numbers. Why do we use 2015? It takes a year to compile everything. And the 2016 numbers are out. 2017 will be out for 2 years. The number of children in the United States reported abused are 3,358,000. That's 45.1 per thousand children. Or let's put it in the size of our youth groups. It's 1 in 25. How big's your youth group? 1 in 25. In Arizona, there were over 61,000 reports in 2015. That's 38 per thousand children. As you can see in the next slide, the statistics, I won't read you all the numbers, but if you look at it, you'll see from 2011 to 2015, child population went up a little bit, and then 13 and 14 it dropped. But the rate went up, and it went up, and it went up every single year. 2011 it was 41.2, 2015 it was 45.1, and from looking at the initial statistics, it's going to be higher for 2016. Those are the real numbers, folks. That's what's happening in this country. There are different types of mistreatment, and this is one of the reasons why I tie these things all together. We have physical abuse. 10% is physical abuse. Neglect is 63%. Sexual abuse is 6%. Psychological and emotional is a little over 2, a little less than 3, and other or unknown is 3%. People that have 2 types of abuse, they're getting abused 2 different ways, you can see those numbers. But most of the time it's one major thing that's brought it to the attention of Child Protective Services. Most of it is neglect with something else or physical with something else. They're beating the child and they're neglecting them. They're beating the child and sexually abusing them. They're neglecting them and doing this or this or this. But there's more, because some kids are being abused with 3 different ways. And you can see those numbers. And while the percentage seems small, imagine what it would be like to be a child having those abuses piled on you day after day after day, unrelenting. So who are the perpetrators? Who's doing this kind of stuff to these kids, right? It's usually family or household members. They're people that are known to the family. We look at who does it. I was shocked when I started doing these reports, because look who does it the most. Mom, 40%. Mom does it. I'm a mom of 5 kids myself. I couldn't imagine doing that. I have 9 grandchildren, I love them dearly. Bounce them on my knee, pick them up, do stuff with them. And yet, 40.9% of abuse is done by mothers. Fathers only do half of it. You initially kind of think, oh, it must be the dad doing it, right? No. There are reasons behind this. Mom might have custody. Mom is struggling financially. Mom is trying to hold down a job and deal with household life and finances and budget and no money. And then maybe there's a boyfriend that comes in the picture and she just wants a little happiness. And with that kid, just shut up. Right? Non-parent abuse. Not as much as you think, is it? You hear all these stories about the daycare provider or the youth group leader or this one or that one. And yes, that absolutely happens. But that is not the biggest amount. Non-parent. Maybe another professional. And we always hear about, the boyfriend did it or something on that order. And actually that's what I hear most when someone comes to me. That's usually what I hear. That's only, the boyfriend, partner of a parent, male, is 2.7%. The numbers are there, and we're seeing that this is happening in the household. The places where I always thought kids would be the absolute safest, and it's not. At some point in their lifetime, 54.5% of children and adolescents, aged 0 to 17, experience some form of physical assault. This was 41.2 in 2011. It has risen over 13% in less than 5 years. That's amazing. Lifetime victimization. When you are abused at age 14 to 17, the assault rate goes up to 69.7%. Property crimes, they're being robbed, those kinds of things. That's happening at 56.6%. Maltreatment by a caregiver, 41%. Sexual victimization, 27%. Our kids are living in a danger zone here in this country. Here in this country. Child maltreatment. There is a site, I've got a lot of words on here that talk about what it is, but this establishes data that you can go and look at and you can examine and see what's going on with it. And it collects the data from Child Protective Services in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia and in Puerto Rico. And you can look at it by state and see what's going on. Key findings in this report show us that the national estimate of children who receive Child Protective Services increased to 9% that we were just talking about. The rate and number have fluctuated of victims, but the increase keeps going up. Yes?
Question, that data that they have in that database, are they taking into account whether a child is double counted, like DCS or CPS has responded to that home more than one time, or are they just counting how many times DCS has had?
It's the number of incidences.
Okay.
So if they get called on an incident and they find 5 things in that breakup that says this is what they happened, but it would be counted as one episode, if you will. If they get called the following month for something, then that's another one, even though it's the same child. 3/4 of the victims are neglected. 17% physically abused, 8% sexually abused. And for 2015, 1,600 people, over 1,600 children died of abuse and neglect. That's a rate of 2.25 per 1,000 children in the national population. So what are some of the factors that play into this? Gang violence is one of them. Kids are finding a place where they can belong, but nothing else is going on. And so here's this gang that they can be a part of something. Gang violence is connected to bullying, is connected to school violence, is connected to intimate partner violence, is connected to child abuse, is connected to elder abuse. It's all connected.
What exactly does that mean?
When you see a child that is bullied, that usually will go into some kind of school violence, either perpetrated against them or they turn into bullying someone smaller. They oftentimes, if they've been bullied or physically abused, will turn on a partner when they become romantically involved with someone. That's usually somebody that's going to, there's a higher rate when they come in and have been abused as a child, that they're not going to let anybody be stronger or tougher than them, and they're going to show who's boss. They also don't have modeling healthy relationships. That's a really tough thing. So school violence, when the bullies are in school, and if schools are not getting on top of this, which is really, really difficult right now, I hear that every week, that's a tough issue. And kids have to go to school and deal with that. One of my youth groups, one of the girls says, I'm going to go into a freshman in high school and I don't know what to do. And the kids in the youth group said, you come with us and we'll make sure that you are in the right places, that you're not going to get bullied, and you will have big brothers and sisters. That's one of the great things about a youth group. A healthy youth group can do that. They can be those positive role models for kids as well. But if they don't have that, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? and then intimate partner violence. And if you have intimate partner violence, it's not a big step to start beating on the kid. Oftentimes it will, if the partner fights back, you hit the kid. Or the kid will try to stop somebody from hitting mom or dad, that kind of thing. Elder abuse, then of all things, their parents get sick and they can't afford a nursing home, so they'll come and live with us and we'll get their Social Security money, but it's not a healthy household to be in. All these things get tied together, and they're not separate things along the way. There are experiences, particularly in early childhood, that make it extremely predictable that individuals are at a substantially higher risk for involvement in violence, be it interpersonal, youth violence, intimate partner violence, dating violence, or child abuse. That does not mean that everybody that gets abused is going to be an abuser. It really does not. It depends on a lot of other factors, but the risk factor is high. It definitely is high. And we're not done. Uplifting morning, isn't it? Elder abuse. When we have an older congregation, or you have a nursing home or assisted living ministry, we're likely to see abuse. I was a chaplain for 3 years in a very large nursing home, assisted living, and it's amazing what you see in there. And it's not all from the staff, folks, believe me. We have to be aware and be able to assist those that we come in contact with. Elders will often tell clergy and other people in ministry things that are happening to them that they won't tell anybody else because they're embarrassed about it. Elder abuse is a significant public health problem. Every year, hundreds of thousands of adults over the age of 60 are abused, neglected, or financially exploited. Elder abuse, including neglect and exploitation, is experienced, are you ready for this? 1 out of every 10 people over the age of 60. 1 out of every 10. Those that live at home. It's likely to be an underestimate because it doesn't get reported very often. I was working in a nursing home, and one of the ladies who was in her high 80s said, "Oh, my mouth really hurts." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And she said, "Well, I broke some teeth off." I said, "Well, have you talked to them about getting the dental work done and everything?" It was a nice nursing home. And she said, "Well, my kids say no. They control my money, and they say my health is so bad it's not worth spending the money, several $1,000 to get my teeth fixed." We put a stop to that, by the way. I notified the advocates in the nursing home, and they worked with the family, and the next time I went in, a week later, she was all taken care of. There are those kinds of things that happen. There are 6 types of maltreatment that we really see among people that are over the age of 60. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, abandonment, and financial issues. Physical abuse. I've gone into the nursing home for our Sunday afternoon nursing home worship, and somebody shows me the bruise shaped like a hand on their arm. How to deal with that? Bruising, elderly people bruise a lot. You know, I'm finding I bruise a lot easier than I used to. That's normal, you know, in the life. But when you start seeing handprints, that's not right. Something's wrong. There's emotional and psychological abuse. They shout at them, they humiliate them, they call them names, limit their access to transportation, to phone, money, resources, threaten them. You know, I don't know how many people I've talked to in their own home, but their kids have moved in to take care of them, and the kids say, "I'm going to put you in a nursing home if you don't behave. I can stay here." What are they going to do? And if dementia should set in, I've told when people are like, "My son keeps wanting me to go to the safe deposit box." "Well, what do you have in there?" "Well, I don't know." Well, long story, but they had CDs in there, and the son took them and had them get one out and sign it one time, and the next time they cashed it. And the son was cashing in all of his CDs. Sexual abuse of those over 60. We don't think about that very often, do we? But it happens. There's unwanted sexual advances by acquaintances, and often in nursing home and nursing type situations. There are a lot of really wonderful, wonderful people that work in caregiving. But there are also people that go into certain jobs because it gives them access. Be aware of that. Neglect. Medical needs aren't being met. And I told you about the woman with her teeth. Medical needs not being met. I was visiting with one person, and for 45 minutes, he was ringing to get water. He had a problem with his throat. He didn't have saliva glands. 45 minutes and he couldn't get water, but he couldn't make his own saliva, and he couldn't get out of bed. Those kinds of things happen. Abandonment. They're left in their home or some caregiving facility and forgotten. One of the prayers that always comes up in our nursing home worship services are that I would get a visit from my family, that I get to see somebody. Financial abuse. I had one woman in the nursing home who was in her 50s, but she had had such a severe back injury, she was going to be there the rest of her life. And she wasn't going to be able to drive again, and she wanted her family to sell the car that she had. She had a very nice car. They wouldn't sell it because her nephew was driving. And he continued to drive her car. There's nothing she could do about it without causing a huge amount of problems, huge amount of things. Those kinds of things are what happens. A lot of times they will have them sign over things they don't want to sign over. Just sign over your house to me, right? That'll work. Or they have an illegal, unauthorized, or improper use of the elder's resources. Sometimes it's by forgery, sometimes it's coercion, sometimes deception. I was talking to somebody I knew that worked in the bank, and they said, yeah, this guy's girlfriend keeps coming in and cashing these really big checks. I said, he doesn't have a girlfriend. Well, it's so-and-so. I said, that's not his girlfriend. That's his son's girlfriend. They were slowly emptying his bank account. Adult sexual misconduct. We're seeing and hearing a lot of that on the news today. Carolyn Holdreed Hagen, and I have her book back over there. I highly recommend it if you are working on policies and procedures. It's an excellent book. It says this: sexual abuse occurs whenever anyone with less maturity or power is tricked, trapped, coerced, or bribed into a sexual experience. It occurs whenever anyone is disempowered by handicap, age, or situation, and is involved in an activity which is sexually stimulating to the perpetrator, and which the victim does not fully comprehend, or to which he or she is unable to give informed consent. The imbalance of power between victim and perpetrator is critical in the determination of abuse. The power imbalance may result from the perpetrator's greater age, size, position, experience, or authority. Physical touch and emotional space might be violated through words, sounds, or exposure to things of a sexual nature. In today's society, where pretty much anything goes, the lines of propriety have been blurred, if not rubbed out. Things are modeled on TV, in movies, on the internet, that makes bad behavior seem normal. Personal boundaries seem to disappear. People ask inappropriate questions, use inappropriate language, and act in an inappropriate manner. You know, when I was growing up, you didn't dare ask a woman, how much she weighed. I get asked that all the time. You wouldn't make comments on someone's physical attributes, but you hear that all the time now. Marie Fortune is now part of the Faith Trust Institute, and she specializes on dealing with people that have been sexually abused. And she tells us that sexual abuse is a multi-dimensional sin. We tend to take it out of the sin category, don't we? We say, well, that's abuse, and it's wrong. But we don't look at it in the sin category. It's a bodily sin, which violates the body integrity of the abused and results in lifelong body-related issues for the victim. It's a relational sin. It violates trust and destroys the possibility of a healthy relationship between the victim and the abused. It likewise makes it difficult for the victim to trust others, and it impedes all their other current and future relationships. It's a social sin because it thrives in secretive situations that sustain abusive relationships and create a destructive environment. Even those not directly involved are affected by abuse in a family, a church, or in a community member. I gotta say, when the abuse happened at the church we were in Pennsylvania, I don't think anybody in the church had sex for at least 6 months. Hearing the details of it disgusted everybody so much that nobody wanted to touch anybody. The last time I gave this, I had this wonderful idea at the end, we'll all hold hands and we'll say, and nobody wanted to hold hands anymore. It affects you when you hear this stuff. It's not easy to listen to. And abuse is a sexual sin because it distorts and misuses sexuality. Abuse damages the victim's feelings about sexuality and leaves them with after effects which will change their ability to accept and express their sexuality long after the abuse has ended. When the 11-year-old boys were abused, one of the things that I advocated for was long-term counseling. Something for them right now. They had been promised, oh, we'll take care of it. I said, are you going to take care of it when they turn 16 and start dating? Are you going to take care of it when they turn 18 and become a legal adult? What about when they're 21 and now they're really adult? What about when they get engaged? What about when they get married? What about when they have their own children? Thankfully, they brought in professionals to come and train not only the children and work with the kids involved, but to also train the staff, to train all the volunteers, to train the session, and so that it was not going to happen again. That's where I got my training, by the way. Professors from Eastern Seminary. Training and awareness. There's stuff that we can do. Boundary training. We need to start with kids, but adults need to hear this too. Professional boundaries relate to finances and confidentiality, as well as sexual relationships and power. We need to set our boundaries, and we need to encourage our people to set boundaries. We can do this in a men's group. Talk about what boundaries should be for men. Real men, not Neanderthals. Boundaries for women. How many women get into an elevator and they're uncomfortable with who gets in next to them, but you don't get out because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? Or you walk really fast to get to your car because you don't want to be perceived as a weakling to ask somebody to walk you to your car. You have these little things that something's wrong, but you just do it anyway because you think, well, it'll be all right. One of the nicest things I had happen to me, I went to a wedding. I had a nice date. It was long before I married Bill. And we were invited to a party at someone's house after the wedding, and we all went, and my date looked around the room and he says, we have to leave. And I said, why do we have to leave? It's a nice group of people. He said, you're the only woman here. I'm not going to have you be here with everybody drinking and you're the only woman here. He knew the boundaries. He cared about what was going on. We need to encourage our young men to do that, and we need to encourage our young women to do that, and our old men, and our old women, and our children to do that. How many times do you say, oh, go give grandma a kiss? Nobody should force to give a kiss. I've had to work with one person in my congregation. I have wonderful, beloved children in my congregation. I love them. I want to just kiss them all the time because they're just cute as buttons. But I've had to tell the people, don't tell them to come up and hug Pastor. If they come up and want to hug me, okay, that's fine. But don't tell them they have to hug me. They should never be told they have to hug somebody, that they have to kiss somebody. Set boundaries. Do ethics training. We do it in business all the time, don't we? You can't accept a gift or, because it might be considered a bribe. What about in the church? We need to think about that as well in the church. Not giving gifts to people inappropriately. I was just talking to a young pastor who had, one of the co-pastors had been given inappropriate gifts by the senior pastor. When she complained to one of the other young pastors, their main pastor and 4 other pastors, the 2 of them went and complained to their governing body. They're not Presbyterian, not that that's any cause, but their governing body, and they promptly got fired. pastors had to make the choice, do we stay and fight it out, and we'll eventually get fired too, or do we resign and make a statement? They resigned. The young pastor that I know ended up moving his family across the country because all of a sudden he didn't have a job. Life changed completely. It's not always fair. The senior pastor who perpetrated everything is still in the pulpit in that church. Because guess what? There's a confidentiality clause. Where's your ethics in this? Where's the ethics in the group putting this forward? Think about that when somebody comes to you in your church. The real and true ethics of what's going on. Accountability partners. That's partially what you're doing here every year. Once a year you get training. It's not because you don't know stuff, but because we get lax in it. We get slapped off in it. We forget about it. And we have to teach everybody no means no. We don't do that anymore. One of my sons came up when his daughter was 6 years old. He goes, Mom, I don't know what to do. I tell her no, she just negotiates with me. I said, you taught her negotiation. You taught her to do that. That's what we teach our kids nowadays, don't we? We don't tell them, no, you can't do it. We tell them, well, no, but try this or this or this. We don't let them work out to begin with. That's my pet peeve. No means no. Working with young people to teach them how to say no makes a huge difference, especially with young people. If we train them when they are in elementary school and junior high and high school, you're not going to have the problems when they're 25 and 35 and 50 and 60 and 80. Consequences of abuse. 36.7% of all women in prison and 14.4% of all men in prison were abused as children. Children who have been sexually abused are 2.5 times higher, 2.5 times more likely to abuse alcohol and 3.8 times more likely to become addicted to drugs. 1/3 of abused and neglected children will later abuse their own children, continuing the horrible cycle of abuse. Do we want to take a little break? Stand up, stretch?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, please. There's water and coffee over in here. There's a restroom there or downstairs. Man, Rick, you're so terrible. There's a restroom there or downstairs.
Somebody said you had a fall. Can I get that? Oh, okay. Well, okay.
You know how that
So I should say,
did watch it.
We also
And they showed, well, they showed a picture, a close picture of one that wasn't completely taped. It had big scars and gashes on it, and that wasn't the one that was hurting. The other one, but he went off. And I watched the trailer with the scissors, because he was cutting all the cake and retake it. So he could go back in. And I felt the same way. Really. That was a pretty exciting game. It's like that one. They had that form goal. And then I stopped and I did a hand on Shaw. Stolen, although I saw his lips, I saw his lips.
When 1 in 25 have been abused, look at the size of your church and think who is talking to you. One of the things that we can do when we come together like this is become that person that they feel safe to come and talk to. It's really, really hard. I can't tell you the number of nights and days and weeks I have sobbed over situations I've heard. I'm a safe person. I have boundaries that I put on things, and I'll share some of that a little bit later in this. But people come because they really talk to me, because I'm open to talk to. I won't judge them for having been abused or for doing something. And that's what we want to be in the church, so that people can have somebody to go to. Share a funny little story I read last night. We're talking about what do you do when this is all happening and how do you help, and those are really important things. The story goes that a gardener was downstream on a big river, and one day somebody came floating down and they were drowning, and he jumped into the water and he pulled them out and he saved them. And the next day at the river, somebody was drowning again, and he pulled them out and saved them. And every day this is going on. But some days he can't save them. They go down. And he's feeling really bad about this, and so he gets everybody excited about saving the people that are drowning in the river. And they raise money and they build a hospital, and on the day that the hospital is going to be dedicated, a little boy walks up to the gardener and says, "Has anybody gone upstream to see what's going on?" We don't do that very often. We're dealing with the after effects, and we really have to. But we also have to look at what's causing these things, what's starting these things, and how do we deal with that. So here we are, impact of violence on development. People's brains develop in response to their environment. Now, I am not a brain specialist, but my granddaughter is going to college for it. When children grow up in a safe and stable and nurturing environment with nurturing relationships, they learn empathy, they learn impulse control, anger management, problem solving, all skills that protect against violence. When children grow up in environments where they don't feel safe, their brain cells actually form different connections with each other to better recognize and respond to threats. Children in these environments often misinterpret neutral facial signs as being angry. They look at things and it might trigger a fight or flight response. Children living persistently threatening environments are more likely to respond violently to fight or to run away, flight, than children who grow up in safe, stable, and nurturing environments. Fight or flight responses are survival skills. And people are born with a little bit of that, but they can override the other skills that enable people to have non-violent conflict resolution. Things like impulse control, empathy, anger management, problem-solving skills. I told you I have 5 kids. I have 4 boys, okay? They've all, unfortunately, been pulled over. They do what Dad told them. They stop the car, roll down the window, put their hands 10 and 2. They don't think about it. Yes sir, no sir, no excuse sir. We're from a military family, by the way. Yes sir, no sir, no excuse sir. But they were raised in a nurturing environment. The processing that their brain does tells them to work out and problem solve. If you are not raised in that kind of environment, you have a different response. Do you ever wonder why people run when the police try to stop them? They fight or they flight, neither of which is a good idea. Brain development, that's what's going on here in much of the time. The parts of the brain that focus on survival and responding to threats, that's a part right back here. That's the animal part. Fight, flight, or freeze. You know, what's going to happen? Have you ever had somebody, you're in your house, and maybe, you know, friends visiting, or your kids or something, and they jump out at you and go, ah! And you go, ah! Or is it just me? That's that response. I'm going to jump back, take an idea of the situation, and then what do you do next? You start laughing usually, right? Oh, you got me that time. Because the front part of your brain has assessed what's going on, perceived that there's no real threat, and can say, oh, this was just an experience, and I can laugh about it. That's why your usual impulse is to laugh when that happens. Gotcha. If this part of the brain has not been developed, because this part is overdeveloped, you can't do that. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he was a sweet man, sweet, sweet man. But we all knew when you went to wake my dad up, you stood at the end of the bed and you wiggled his feet. He was a World War II veteran. When he woke up, if somebody was standing there, wow. Most sweet, gentle man you'd ever want to meet. But if you startled him, he was going to punch you. That was just his reflex from being in the military. There's a problem when that kind of brain development happens in recognizing and responding to perceived threats. Fight, flight, or freeze. It goes to the amygdala. That's the immediate response. That's the animal part. That tells you, run away, or stand here and fight, or try to hide. Don't let them see me here. It doesn't go to the prefrontal cortex, evaluating the choices. Attention abilities, impulse control, sleep, and fine motor skills are affected by this. Neural pathways need to recognize and understand situations to develop. And if all kids experience is high anxiety, high stress, and high violence, the only thing that's developing is the thing that's going to save them in that situation. They don't know how to cope outside of that because their brain doesn't function that way. Acute stress prevents memory storage. If you're under acute stress, you can't learn anything. Try to study while bear's chasing you. Say the alphabet while bear's chasing you. You can't study. And kids are under this kind of pressure constantly, 24 hours a day. There's very few places that are safe for them. They're getting it at home. They go to school and they're bullied. The after-school group is a gang and they're doing violence. When I was in school, I went to school in inner city Philadelphia, and I said, well, yeah, I worry about my kids. And one of the women says, yeah, you worry about your kids when you take them to the bus stop. She says, I worry about my kids because there's blood on my front steps every day. That's what our kids are living in. And I don't care what city you live in, and I don't care how affluent the city is, that's what our kids are living in. Even if it's not happening in their own home. The threat of somebody shooting, they can have the most wonderful home inside, but the fact that when they step out the door, they could be shot, or a shot could come through the house, that puts stress on them. And it puts things like cortisone and, the steroid push, adrenaline push all the time on them. And their bodies break down from this. You can't live constantly like that. What can churches do? We need to be that safe place for them to go. We need to be the place where there's no threats, where there's safe people, where there's accountability, but people don't scream and yell at them if they drop milk on the floor. They need a place that's safe. The biggest thing a church can be, besides Christ. The immediate effects of abuse. We see it in depression, in drug use, eating disorders, arrests. The girl I had in my youth group who was cutting herself, we were talking one day and she revealed to me, we were talking about going to camp, and she revealed that she couldn't go to camp because her part-time job is what put the groceries on the table in their household. If she took off work to go to church camp, they were not going to eat. This was one of the things the church came around her, and the church got their groceries, and we also connected them with other resources. Violence can lead to more violence. Most people who are victims of violence don't act violently, but they experience, or when they're exposed to violence, they're at a higher risk for being victims of other forms of violence and for inflicting other harm on other people. Survivors of one form of violence are likely to be victims of other forms of violence. You know, if you're being bullied at school, you might be bullied at home too. You might be abused in a dating relationship. Girls who are sexually abused are more likely to suffer from physical violence and sexual re-victimization, engage in self-harming behavior, and be a victim of an intimate partner violence later in life. Youth who have been physically abused by a dating partner are more likely to have suffered abuse as a child, been a victim of sexual assault, or witnessed violence in their family. Youth who report attempting suicide are approximately 5 times more likely to have also been in a physical fight in the last year. Women and girls involved in gangs often experience physical, emotional, and sexual abuse by other gang members and are more likely to have been physically or sexually abused as children. I know a young man who joined a gang and he wanted to get out of the gang. And the way he could get out of the gang was to take a baseball bat and beat another young man with the baseball bat. The young man the gang chose for him happened to be the district attorney's son. He spent 2 years in prison. Through mentoring with good Christian people who came alongside him, his family who came alongside him, he is an excellent husband and father today. But it takes people coming alongside. Children who have been bullied are at greater odds for becoming involved in physical violence. They might be carrying weapons or be physically fighting people. Survivors of violence are at a higher risk for behaving violently. Children who experience physical abuse and neglect early in their lives are at a greater risk for committing violence against their peers, especially boys. Bullying, teen dating violence, committing child abuse, elder abuse, intimate partner abuse, and sexual violence later in life. Youth who bully others are more likely to have witnessed parental violence and intimate partner violence amongst their parents and parents' partner than those who don't bully others. Adults who are violent towards their partner are also at a higher risk of abusing their kids. Youth who bully are more likely to carry weapons and be physically violent, and they're also more likely to sexually harass peers over time and commit violence against partners as teens and as adults than those who did not bully. George Benjamin says, we have to figure out how we break down these barriers and work in a more collaborative way, not just within the healthcare system, but across the social services system and the criminal justice system. Professionally, we have silos, and we operate in these silos that we've got to break down. Across the country, people are working to prevent child abuse, are right across the hall from people working on abuse against women. And they don't work together. As we go into communities to bring everybody to the table, don't let people say, I work on child abuse, and this is about gang violence. Don't let people say, I work on violence against women, and this is child abuse. This thing, all this violence, is connected. So there are many, many different issues at stake here, and it's really hard to hear them all. So what do we do about it? What are we supposed to do? Knowing what you're up against is a good start. Just being aware of it is a really good start. In light of all we're seeing on the news today, remember that all this stuff that I'm telling you about goes for all kinds of violence, including sexual harassment that we're seeing. How do abusers pick their targets? I went to a wonderful, well, if you call any class on abuse wonderful, but the premise was they interviewed abusers on abuse. And they asked them, how did you pick your target? How did you decide to abuse that one? And the answer is they chose the easiest one. That's why parents often abuse their own children. They're easy targets. That's why the boyfriend abuses. It's an easy target. They avoid places with restrictions like policies and procedures that are carried out. It's similar to the thief that avoids your house because you've got the alarm system sign, right? A professional thief is going to get in your house. That alarm does nothing. I don't care what locks you have on your doors. They do nothing. To a professional, to someone that's their goal of doing it. I hate to tell you, we're not going to wipe all this stuff out. But to the person that is casual about it and takes the opportunity, having good policies and procedures and following them can make a huge difference. If they know that they have to be a member of the church for at least 6 months and then have 6 months of internship under somebody else before they're allowed to work alone with the kids, they'll go elsewhere where there's no policy and procedure. If you're fingerprinting and the church down the street isn't, they'll go to this church down the street. It's easier. If you have things that say you can't go to these points in the church with kids, or you can't be alone with kids, I read your policy, you've got a good policy. You've got a good policy here. Those kinds of things, you make it too hard for them. Not going to do that. We'll go where it's easier. So part of it is like the alarm system in your house. You're making it hard for the abuser to find an easy target. What makes the easy target? Availability. It's not stranger danger for the most part. It's usually somebody they come in contact with. That's why abuse happens in the home, in the school, in the church, in the scouting or the social club. Somebody builds up a relationship. They become the trusted person. So when they do something that's a little bit off, they say, oh, that's just Bob. It's all right. He must know what he's doing. We know him, right? It's somebody that doesn't have a strong support system makes a great victim. If there's missing or busy parents, they say, I understand what you need. Mom and Dad don't. The day my preteen son came home and told me that one of the people in our neighborhood said that to him, he goes, it made me feel really creepy, Mom. I came home. We set up definite rules about that person in our neighborhood. They can fit in. Sometimes it's homeless. And there are a lot more homeless than you think because a lot of kids are couch surfing. They may not be on the street, but they don't have a home that's theirs. They're living on somebody's couch until the family gets tired of them, or they start costing too much money in groceries. Sometimes it can be helpful to give families a little bit of space, to, oh yeah, he can come and stay with us till you get everything worked out at home, and then they'll go back home and you work on that stuff. But there are a lot of kids that don't have a permanent home. They don't know how they're going to eat if the door's locked when they get there. They don't know if they're going to be able to wash their clothes or not. They don't know those things. And all these wonderful things at school that they expect you to pay for, how do we do that? I don't know. A lot more of that's happening. It's not just kids that are in some shelter someplace or on a street corner. Someone who cannot tell or be intimidated or coerced not to tell. Who can be intimidated or coerced not to tell. Small children who can't articulate what happened. Easy targets. Handicapped people, all types of handicap. Mentally, physically, even simply being deaf puts them at a much higher risk of being abused. They come in contact with more people and they have more intimate knowledge of their issues and have physical contact in their caregiving oftentimes. Deaf children experience a particularly high level of sexual abuse. In 2004, deaf women reported childhood sexual abuse more than twice as often as the hearing population. Deaf men more than 3 times as likely to be abused. Why? Because communication is more difficult. The young might not have the ability to articulate, but they're talking to people who they can't, the children might not be able to sign yet. They are talking to professionals who don't know sign language, and there's just no help for them. So we have to be particularly caring about people that are in those kinds of situations. Someone susceptible to guilt and blame. You enjoyed it, didn't you? Weren't you turned on when we did that? And then the kid says, well, yeah, but, maybe I better not say anything. They play on their guilt and their shame. They were drunk. They were high. They were dressed provocatively, right? Now, it's all a good thing to maintain control and not do those things, but the perpetrator still has a responsibility to not be the perpetrator. There are cultural issues. Female genital mutilation. Illegal aliens have a really high incident of abuse because they won't go to the authorities. And if they do, there are language barriers. Refugees have a very high incident of being abused. Why? Because they have come from an extremely violent background usually. If you're in a war-torn country where your home is getting bombed every day, your stress level is intense and crazy, and you're plunked in a country where everything's different. The language is different, the culture is different, how everything is done is different, and it's overwhelming. There's high stress level there. They may also have a fear of police because in their country, the police are the perpetrators of a lot of violence. So we need to be aware and open for how to help them. Where does this kind of thing happen? Everywhere. But it's availability and privacy. The youth pastor literally took a child into his office and abused him on the day of the church picnic when there were over 900 people on the church campus. Didn't stop. But there's also trips and camps, cars. Let's go on an adventure. One of his trips was, let's go adventuring. And as moms, we squawked about it, but it became looking in people's windows as they went adventuring. What can we do about it? What can we as a church do to make our church and everybody we come in contact with more difficult targets? We want to lessen the risk of false accusations, and yes, those happen. Somebody's looking to discredit somebody. Somebody's looking to sue for financial gain. And somebody might be unintentionally causing an issue. All it takes is for a teenage girl in the back of the pastor's car to get out and say, and somebody says, what took you so long? Oh, Pastor so-and-so was abusing me. You say, listen, we left your house 3 minutes ago, But you know what? People never look at you the same. They'll never look. You can prove it all you want to, but they'll never look at you the same. And kids think it's funny because their boundaries are not there. So we need to be careful of that. We need to look at our vulnerability points, our events, our Sunday school, youth group, child care, after-school programs, camp. We need to look at our staff with background checks and supervision and training. Our facility, who has keys and to what, and should they? Are there places where kids can get isolated by an adult or an older child? Are there bathrooms with doors to a courtyard outside? That's a big one here in Arizona. The bathroom outside is unlocked because it's in a courtyard, but you don't know who's going in. Are there windows in all the doors for people to see inside the room? Is there a transparency? If you don't have a window, do you have windows that you can open the windows where people walking by can look in, see what you're doing in there? What about the style that we do things in? It used to be really popular in a youth room to have a whole bunch of couches, right? And what happens? They're like puppies. They're piling on each other. Teenage kids do not need to be piling on each other, folks. They don't. We let kids sit on each other's lap in youth, right? Not my youth group. That was something I had to really break kids up. Let's shut off the lights and have a secret game. Lines open. Who's allowed to interact with kids in their most vulnerable moments, or anybody in the church in their most vulnerable moments? Don't say, give me a hug or sit on my lap. Teach parents not to say, go give Uncle Bob a kiss. What about our regulations that we have? What requirements do we have to deal with some of these things? Are they a member of the church? For how long? Have they passed a background check? What exactly are you looking for in that background check? What will make you say yes or no to somebody if something shows up on a background check? Think about that. Who sees the background check? And who maintains it? Consider gay and transgender issues, especially if you're doing something like going to camp. I have a teacher that is a very good friend of mine who is taking a small group of students on an overnight trip. And the usual thing that we do when we take kids on a trip, what do? 2 queen beds, right? But if you have a transgender person, you need to be sensitive both to that person and to the other people that might not want to share that bed. And when you're 15 years old, you can say no if you don't want to share a bed with someone. There was one 17-year-old transgender in her group. And they talked about, they didn't really want to have that 17-year-old be alone in a room because they're very vulnerable to anybody that's outside in the hotel. The leader doesn't want to share a room because that's an adult with a child. The other children of either sex didn't want to share a room because they felt vulnerable. So they weighed and debated what to do about this. I'm not going to tell you what they did. You have to wrestle those kinds of things through yourself. But you have to think about that. You have to think about how you're going to approach these issues that we live in. Teach kids to simply say no, and teach them that no means no. Once you give your reason for your no, you've opened up negotiations. No, I can't go to the party. Why not? I've got homework. I'll help you do your homework. Role play with kids on stuff. No means no. I don't have to explain to you why I said no. No means no. Once you give a reason, you've opened negotiations. Come with me in my car. No. Are you afraid to ride in a car with somebody? Haven't you ever dated before? Haven't you ever tried this before? Are you just a baby or are you a grown-up? They open negotiations. Wonderful book, and it's back there. You can take a peek at it. I do have a reading list for you. That's Gavin's DeBecker, The Gift of Fear. I highly recommend it for anybody doing policy things. I recommend it for any female to read. But we have to teach our kids to say no. We role play with teenagers on this. Because they get talked into doing stuff they don't want to do because they've run out of excuses. Teach them no means no. You don't have to give any more excuses. Practice it with them. And kids need to be allowed to follow their gut feeling when something feels wrong. I don't want to go over there. It kind of creeps me out. All right, you don't have to go. Practice this stuff with kids. They don't learn it without you teaching it to them. And especially if they're getting pressure from other places, having somebody that is an adult in a church especially saying, you can say no, is strong. Practice safe codes or safe words and use this with you're working with parents. This is for the kid that asks for permission to do something that they don't want to do, but they want to save face. You might say yes to it. Mom, can I go over to Bobby's house? Sure. When's Uncle John coming over? That was our red flag. When's Uncle John coming over? Whenever my kids ask me, when's Uncle John coming over, I'd say, oh, I forgot, Uncle John's going to be here in a little bit. They don't have Uncle John. Uncle John's going to be here in a little bit. No, you can't go after all. Or I come and pick them up. That was their cue to me that something was wrong. My kids use it with my grandkids now. There's a lot of pressure for kids to do stuff they don't want to do. One of my sons was offered, drinking and stuff. He said, I can't do that. My mom and dad are waiting up for me when I get home. I'm going to have to talk to my mom when I walk in the door at midnight. You guys just go to bed. I'm going to have to talk to her, believe me. She'll know. I can't do that. There's something too where you can work out with families to do however, but they ask the question, texting is real big, and then they just text an X. And when you get the text X, not kisses anymore, but that means call me in 2 minutes and tell me I have to come home. You're going to get me. It lets them save face. They don't have to say anything. This is really important when they get into hazing stuff. Hazing is huge in this country. And it's done in youth groups. I've been in youth groups where the trick was you pull up your shirt, right? You lay down, pull up your shirt, and they light a tissue on fire and then put a cup over it. Well, of course, the fire sucks all the air out of the cup and you end up with what amounts to a big hickey. That's abuse, people. You ever go to camp, and pardon me, but the boys light their farts on fire? I talked to a male youth leader who was young, just out of college, and we had that discussion. And I said, explain how you're going to explain to me you standing there when the kid has burns. Or when somebody walks in and he's bent over with his drawers dropped. You think we don't have hazing things? We do. In the churches. Put an end to it. I have twin sons, and I didn't find out about this till long after. When they got pledged to a fraternity, they were handed a bottle of Jack Daniels and a box of cigars and put inside a U-Haul truck and told they were not going to come out till the Jack Daniels and the box of cigars were gone. And they did. Sick as dogs. Why didn't they say no? Why did they say no? They're twins. There's 2 of them there. Why did they say no? But they didn't. Kids that we are teaching now in elementary and junior high and high school are going to go to college where they don't have the same restrictions that they do when mom and dad are facing them every night. We've got to give them the ability to say no to things. Have them understand their own boundaries of what they want and what they're willing to do and put up with and what they aren't. So that when they go out into the world and somebody says, come in my office, there's no reason to. I worked before I went into the ministry as an engineer, and I worked as a female engineer. I was often the only woman in the whole department. And yeah, occasionally something was said. Usually it was just somebody's mouth and brain were not connected, and we got to be aware of that. Somebody would say something, and say, your brain is just not connected here. But the couple times I did have somebody say something, one time I turned to that person and said, you just said what to me? I got profuse apologies. The second time, I slapped the guy. It never happened again. If it had happened again, I probably would have reported it. Both of those times I did not. And then there's the stupid guys. I'm sorry, I have 4 sons. Guys are stupid. Okay? I was the only woman. They forgot that I was a woman. And I turn around, and one of the guys has his pants open next to me. Because he's, guys, you unzip your pants, you tuck your shirt in, right? And I turned around and I said, are you, really? Really? Are you kidding me? And he about died. He had just forgotten. He wasn't trying to be abusive. He had just forgotten I was a woman. So we need to be prepared for stuff that is simple and just stupidity and stuff that's real. And our kids need to know the difference, and they need to know what to do and call it on the garbage it is. So how do we develop and respect boundaries? Don't tell kids, I've said this a couple times, to hug and kiss if they don't want to. Help them to develop what they want or what they don't want. Help them to develop that. To not use their sexuality as a tool. Teach them how to react and respond. I was at camp with a 16-year-old girl, and she was being somewhat mildly harassed by a young boy. Now, church camps, remember, are not all good, solid, loving, wonderful Christian kids. A lot of times parents send their kids to church camps because they think maybe the kid will get some good advice or good help or make some friends that aren't going to, steal from the grocery store down the road. The boys in the team, in my group, of course, wanted to just beat the daylights out of them. That was their solution. And I said, no, that's not what we're going to do. First of all, I paired her up with somebody else so she was never alone. And this took place in a matter of a couple hours. This was not a long drawn-out thing. Paired her up with somebody so she was not alone. I tailed him for a little bit to see exactly with my own eyes what was going on. Then I went to his counselor and I said, this is the problem with this child doing this and this and this. Are you going to take care of it or am I? He took care of it. Realistically, it was a young boy who didn't understand any boundaries. But it was a learning lesson for everyone. Pair up when you're feeling threatened. Go to an authority when you're feeling threatened. Don't solve it by violence. Deal with the people who can actually solve your problem. Wonderful learning experience for kids. Be a safety net for those that are at risk. Connect with schools to support. Find out what kids need lunches on Friday afternoons for the weekends. Washers and dryers. A lot of schools that have taken out the showers because they don't do gym class anymore, put showers back in so kids have a place to shower. In Globe, we're actually putting in showers for the homeless because they don't have a place to go. Look for housing for them. Be a resource for housing. There actually is quite a bit of housing, but they don't know how to get it. Who do you call? How do you get it? How do you qualify? The paperwork is unbelievable in dealing with some of this stuff. Be that safety net. Work with Child Protective Services. They are here to help the kids ultimately. Whatever mistakes might get made along the way, their goal is to help kids. Promote foster care. We were talking on the break, there aren't enough foster care homes in the state of Arizona. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and that wasn't part of what I wrote in here, but their kids are being put into group homes. The problem with that, when you live someplace like Globe in Miami and Superior, any place that's remote, where do the kids go in the group home? Probably Tucson or Phoenix. How do the parents get to see their kids? You might be the person that could shuttle people back and forth a day or two a month, maybe. Or maybe you'd be the person who's willing to go into the Child Protective Services offices with a bucket of water and bleach and wash the toys. Wash the woodwork where the snotty little noses have been. Our ministerial association and the Globe Miami Superior group did that. All the pastors went in and did that. Consider something like $5, $10, $25 gift cards. Because you know, when they get kids in the middle of the night, they take them with just sometimes the clothes on their back. Kid doesn't have any diapers. Who's buying the diapers? Whoever picked them up. Having those gift cards they can do to get some initial things is huge. Those are really big deals that you can do to help. When kids go to get picked up, where do they put their stuff in? Black trash bag. What's that say about them? Black trash bag. Wonderful woman in Scottsdale, Adrienne Grimaldi, has for 12, 14 years done a program where you sew bags that CPS has to go pick up kids. And they're fun kid prints, and the kids get to keep them, and usually a note in the Bible goes in it when the churches do it. They brought people in, you bring your home sewing machine in to churches, and you got social time, sewing together for a day. Schools are taking this on as a school sewing project, home ec. There's all these kinds of things that can be wonderful, wonderful things. Adrienne wanted to do, I think it was 600, she's done over 6,000 with all the groups participating across the country. If you want to know how to get involved, let me know and I'll give you her address. Amazing woman. The sad part is 6,000 has not been enough. They need more. But it's a way to connect in ways maybe your neighborhood, your church, your whatever group you're in could feel connected to something without necessarily having to put hands on you. Teach these skills, teach budgeting, teach cooking, teach parenting classes. My husband Bill's an excellent cook, and he and I went in the church basement where his kitchen is, and we had moms come in that didn't know how to cook. We gave them simple, economic, good nutrition recipes and taught them how to cook it, and then we sat down and had dinner. They don't know how to cook these days, so they're eating fast food, which is junk and it's expensive. to say a lot of these moms are not cooking at home. Occasionally we get the call, I need eggs, could I have some, have some money to get eggs or juice or something, but they're not giving their kids soda pop anymore. Big things happening. Teach these skills. They don't know how to budget. Well, I checked my ATM balance and it says I have money in there. Right? Be a resource for help. Where do I go to get food stamps? To get ID? I know what's one of the things this church does, get IDs for people. Where do I go to find housing? Where do I go to get help with this or help with that? There's a lot of government help out there, but nobody knows how to get it. I don't know how to get it if I didn't have my trusted list. So afterwards, somebody's been accused, they've been found guilty, maybe they've admitted to being guilty. I will say, in the pastor I've been telling you about in Pennsylvania, he admitted to what he had done and served all of 7 months in jail. Does your church advertise all are welcome? But what happens when a convicted sex offender takes those words literally? Church officials and legal advocates are struggling about this. And if people are convicted of sex crimes are included in congregations, and should they be legally, especially if children are present. Did you realize that if you have a nursery in your church, just being in the parking lot could get someone arrested because they're within a certain amount of feet from children? You have to be aware of those kinds of things. Where's the balance between protecting the congregation and supporting the religious freedom of abusers in light of God's grace? How do we look at that? Someone once said, a key lesson for churches is this: the policy, however it winds up, must be a consensus of the congregation. I talked to so many pastors, this is what I read, I talked to so many pastors who decided they're going to make the decision because they know what's theologically and spiritually right, and that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. The congregation has to be on board for whatever it is you decide you're going to do about this. In North Carolina, attorney Glenn Girding is representing James Nichols. James Nichols is a convicted sex offender, and he's contesting the state statute that makes it illegal for him to be within 300 feet of the church's nursery. He was arrested in the church parking lot after service. All he had done was go to church. So he's contesting this. That has other ramifications, though, remember. Technically, a person could go to an empty church and violate the statute if that church has a nursery. James Nichols was convicted in 2003 of attempted second-degree rape and released from prison in 2008. Some churches have covenant partners, a phrase for chaperones, but it's more than just watching what they do. They're there to assist the person in spiritual growth. They can't just be the bodyguard to make sure they don't very well they're here. But they need to really come alongside and help with spiritual growth part of it. What about the abuser's family? That's a tough one, especially if it takes place in your congregation, or heaven forbid, your pastor. The abuser has been abused and may be arrested and may be in jail, and the church is in pain. What about his wife and children? What about perhaps the loan that the church and the presbytery is holding on their house? The pastor in Pennsylvania was married. He had 2 preschool daughters. His wife was pregnant. The church held the mortgage on their home, which happened to sit on the edge of the school's ball field. She was hurting. She had lost his income, possibly losing her home. He was in prison when she went into labor. She chose to stay with him, and it is 20-some years later, they are still married. Families hurt too. But the pain of the church's pain is hard to see sometimes. The church grieves and the church hurts over these things. And no matter how you handle it, somebody's going to be hurt on that too. A woman came to me and she said she found child porn on her husband's computer. What should she do about it? Well, first of all, in Arizona, a spouse who knows about this and doesn't report it can be convicted right along with the perpetrator. Did you know that? I told her that I would go to the police with her, or I gave her 24 hours to go by herself. And I also, with her permission, called a friend on the police department, and I found out who would be the best person for her to contact. She saw that person, that detective, and their home was searched, and the porn was found, and he was tried and convicted. He went to jail. She divorced him. Without his income, their home had to be sold, and she barely broke even with it. After a few months, she moved several hours away. And I later saw her and we talked about the situation, and I said I was just heartbroken over everything she had gone through. And she said to me, I came to you because I knew you would insist I tell. I didn't have the strength to do it on my own. I've lost all my financial security, but I've never been happy. My motto has always been, if you're hurting somebody else, if you're hurting others, I will tell. I spent a long time as a youth leader, and my thing is there, if you're flunking math, I'm not going to tell your parents. If you're being abused, I'm going to talk. Don't tell me something you don't want me. If it's something on that thing, don't tell it to me unless you want me to go to the police. She knew this. That's why she chose to come to me. She knew I'd go to the police with her if she needed it. Be the person that can go to CPS with the person. Sit there with them. Sit in the police station with them if you need to. Now there's a lot of discussion on confidentiality, and I really get that. I'm a pastor. I love my congregation. I'm always careful what I can share with anybody else. And I haven't shared any stories about the congregation I'm in, okay? So don't think that. But I put the safety of people first. I'm not going to let people hurt other people or hurt themselves.
Can I make a point about that? One thing you may not be aware of, but in a state like Florida, if a pastor receives a report of abuse and does not report it, they can be held legally responsible and charged.
And in Arizona.
And it's actually in Arizona too. It's probably true
We're
now.
going to get to that.
It's probably not true in most states. So understand that there are things we cannot keep.
Yep. And we will get to that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
In fact, that's our next section.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's 5 minutes. Timmy, need to stand up. Are you okay? Or you want to...
Survival.
Stand up, shake a little bit, and make it quick, and we'll get back down.
We'll get back to seventh inning stretch. Seventh inning stretch. Take me out.
So what does the law say? Oh, wasn't it? I didn't pay for that lead-in either, you know. I'm not a police officer and I'm not an attorney. The laws change and they develop, but to the best of my knowledge, as of about 10 o'clock last night when I double-checked, this is the current law. The first question should never ever be, how can I avoid liability? That's not the question you should be asking when you are developing a policy. But instead, how can I avoid the injury? How can I avoid the injury? It needs to be your focus. In Arizona, Arizona's law regarding both mandatory and discretionary reporting of child abuse through the revised standards is found in the state criminal code. And it's confusing and it's frustrating. And there's a few rules here and here, and there's a lot of lists of all kinds of stuff that goes with it. So one of the things that I get asked a lot is, can mandated reporter be successfully sued by the person reported for reporting child abuse? It specifically says that if you report in good conscience, you're not trying to cause trouble, but you really believe it's going on, you are immune from any civil or criminal liability by reason of that action unless such person acted with malice or unless the person has been charged with or is suspected of abusing or neglecting the child or children in question. So if you have one spouse that calls CPS on the other spouse, it goes into question because which one of them is really abusing and doing that. Is there a penalty for failure to report? A person who violates any provision of the section is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor, except if failure to report involves a reportable offense, and there's a list of these things. The person is guilty of a Class 6 felony. If you are a mandated required reporter and you don't report, it's a Class 6 felony in the state of Arizona. That means that if you fail to make the report, you could get 6 months in jail or a fine up to $4,000. If it's a felony level, depending on what's going on here, you could get a sentence of up to a year or up to 1.5 years and a fine of $150,000. And a felony in Arizona can be prosecuted up to 7 years after the discovery by law enforcement. Being sued for failure to report is a very real possibility if the perpetrator later injures the same child again or harms another child. If they found out that you knew and didn't do anything about it, you are going to be in trouble. Who must report? As of 2003, there's a list of separate kinds of people that have to report. Part of it is employment, things like school personnel, but they don't define school personnel. So guess what? If you have an after-school program, that could be considered part of school personnel. Domestic violence victims advocates. So it might be people that are treating any patient, like a nurse, a counselor, psychologist, social worker, behavior health professional, physician, physician's assistant, optometrist, dentist, osteopath, chiropractor, podiatrist. You must report based on reasonable belief developed from any source. It doesn't have to be the kid comes and tells you, but somebody else tells you about it. A peace officer, that means also a school resource officer. And they could make a real good point if you have a security officer in your church. Any person who has responsibility for the care and treatment of a minor. Who is that in your church? Think about care and treatment. A parent, step-parent, or guardian of a minor believed to have been abused, if you knew about it and didn't report it. Members of clergy are mandated reporters, a priest or a Christian Science practitioner. So if you're a member of clergy here, you're a mandated reporter. What kind of conduct has to be reported? Reportable offenses are basically physical injury, abuse, child abuse, a reportable offense, and they're kind of gray area of what that could be. Neglect, denial, or deprivation of medical care or nourishment with the intent to cause or allow death of an infant. All these terms have specific statutory definitions or meanings. I'm giving you an overview here, so you're going to have to look up some deeper things, and the church has the right statutes because you're getting a copy of all this stuff. Any person...
Quick question. It doesn't actually apply here, but does that still take in the confidentiality of the confessional?
That is a gray area, but it's only slightly gray on that. They're really... You're not supposed to even take that in confessional. That's supposed to be one of those things that is not confidential. That, ministers wrestle with that. Ministers really wrestle with that. But I have seen elders in a church be called into court because somebody emailed them what was going on. Okay? So if you don't, and it gets out that you knew, you can go to court. You can say confidentiality and still go to jail. Any person in all these listed report people who reasonably believes that a minor, someone under 18, is or has been a victim of one of the listed crimes or events, other than by accidental means. So if it's been some not accidental issue, and it's not explained by available medical history. Presbytery de Cristo has its own rules. If you're part of the Presbyterian Church, in De Cristo Presbytery, the rules here are all those who serve the church within this presbytery, either in a temporary or permanent relationship, including all individuals serving in ordered ministries, employees, staff, and volunteers are expected to adhere to Christian ethical principles in their sexual conduct and in their exercise of authority and power. The church and its extended ministries are to be seen as safe places in the community, places where it is known that sexual misconduct is not tolerated. This is part of our Christian witness to the community, and therefore, the leadership of any group using the church premises in the presbytery for their activities is also subject to this policy. Okay, that's the presbytery's policy on this issue. So if you have the scouts coming in and using it, they are under the same rules. De Cristo has a really good policy, and if you haven't read it, read it. You might want to incorporate, like I said, this church has a very, very fine policy, but it always pays to review things along the way. When in doubt, contact the teaching elder, contact the presbytery pastor, contact the local police, call the child protection services. You can always say, I have a theoretical case. What if somebody came up to me and said this? You're just giving them a theoretical case. Sometimes they'll say, oh, that 17-year-old girl and her 19-year-old boyfriend. No, that's not the case. This might be something. But you have resources to go to. You don't have to, everybody's going to know what you're doing, but you have resources to go to with that. Protection from harm should be of utmost importance. We heard all the problems that happen if people are being abused. And I know I'm a pastor, but let me tell you something, breaking confidentiality, and they know that I won't keep that, I make that up front. When this kind of thing protects some kid, I'm going to do it in a heartbeat. I'm going to do it in a heartbeat. I make sure when people come, they know that I'm not going to keep those kind of secrets. Developing a policy. Look at your youth and child protection program. Consider references. And not just the local database, as was shared with me a little bit earlier, not just the local police force, but countrywide. Because it's not unusual for somebody to move across country when they've been caught. So if you're only checking Arizona, but they're from Pennsylvania, you aren't going to know. So you want to check everything there. Check the references of all the volunteers who work with minors. My brother's a federal agent, he's retired now, but one of the things he taught me was, you don't just check their references, you ask their references for references. If you give me somebody's name, I'll go and ask them, but then I'll ask them for references on me. And then I'll ask them. You need to do that. Training. Train people on how they're supposed to act, because a lot of people don't even think about it. You know, they're joking around and I'm gonna make you sit still, I'll sit on you. No, you won't. You know, we train people. Train all the volunteers. Train anybody that works with children. Anybody who's going to have contact with children. Make sure your paid staff in particular know the state law requirements. Because that's really important. You're still responsible whether you know the law or not. Have a reporting procedure if somebody comes to you. Everybody's so afraid that, oh, it's my pastor wouldn't do that. Well, your pastor probably isn't. I'm a pastor, I'm not going to do that to kids. But I had a kid come in from one of the adventure things, one of the things we were doing, and with a black eye. I said, where'd you get the black eye? Well, Grandma hit me. Okay, let's start taking care of this. You have to know how to do that. You have to be prepared to do that. Maybe practice on each other a little bit if you're somebody that's actually doing this. If you're working with kids, take a couple hours sometime and just practice. One of you being the kid and reporting and the other one going back and forth. Be sure you have insurance coverage. You know, that's a practical thing. Presbytery de Cristo just really looked at everybody's insurance coverage to make sure that that's one of the things you probably really covered for. Have a defined response plan. What if somebody makes an allegation? What do you do? You're not just taking notes, but how do you tell the congregation? Do you tell the congregation? What happens when the news media is outside the door? Who speaks for the church? You want to make sure that you don't have everybody and their brother telling a story that they know nothing about. Usually, if the senior pastor is not involved, that's usually a good person to do the talking. They have a lot of experience talking. But you might also have people in the congregation that are going to be more skilled at it. Maybe you have a good attorney. Maybe you have somebody that works in public relations, and they can do that. What you want to say is, we are looking into this. We do not tolerate this in this congregation and in this church, and we are going to make every effort to make this safe. Whatever you do not try to hide it. Do not try to sweep it under the rug. Do not try to, in the case in Pennsylvania, just have him quietly go away before anyone finds out. That split the church. It wasn't what he did that split that church. It was how it was handled that split that church. You take a united stand. We don't tolerate this. We're going to get to the bottom and find out what's true, and we're going to work with it. Take your policies seriously. It's real easy to not do that. So keys to a successful policy. How many of you are not from this church? We've got a couple of people. Okay. I know this church has a policy because they sent it to me. Where is your policy kept in your church? You all ought to know that. If you're sitting in this room, you're required to understand and take this training. You all ought to know where that policy lives. And you all ought to be able to get your hands on it if you are, whatever your position is in this church, doing it, and somebody comes up to you and talks to you. That means if the church office happens to be locked, where's a copy in the youth room? Where's a copy where the Sunday school teachers can get to? Where are the copies of everything? You need to know these things. Because you will not have a whole bunch of time to call Sheila and say, where's that book and what do we do? You don't do that. Is it a cookie cutter policy that just, a lot of churches just take the cookie cutter policy that the presbytery has and say, that's enough. Don't do that. Look at your own church, the own needs, and look at it every year. Nobody wants to do that. But your situation's changed. You have something, a new thing that's happening here, maybe kids on campus, or maybe, some kind of fellowship. You have something going on that changes. You need to be sure that your policy covers whatever those kinds of things are. Writing an abuse policy for a church is a vital ministry in our painful world. You're not going to be able to prevent everything, but you're going to be better equipped to stave off attacks and to deal with them in the event that they do happen. And you're also going to be dealing with the lives of your congregation outside of your church. If they trust you, they will come to you if they're in crisis. If you have not heard any stories, now, I'm not a magnet for this stuff, honest, I'm not. But when you go and talk in 40 and 50 and 60 events on this stuff, people tell you stories. If nobody's ever told you this story, or their story, they don't feel safe. I guarantee you, you know at least 1 or 2 or 3 people that have been abused. I guarantee you. If you don't know their story, they have not felt comfortable to tell you that story. 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4. When a team works out a specific policy for a church, not just take a cookie cutter thing, but sweats and bleeds over that policy and looks at what about this and what about that, they take ownership in it. It's important that you take ownership. You need to understand it. Leaders need to be on board. I can't tell you how many times I have given talks to sessions and the pastor doesn't show up. Or I've been on a session and they say, well, 5 of us are teachers, we have to go through this. Different. Make sure that people are not just in compliance with it, but in support of it. One of the churches set up the rule that the pastor had, all doors had to have a window in them, which is a pretty good rule. Well, the pastor had a window to his office, but it was to the secretary's office, and the secretary's office was always locked. So you couldn't ever look in his office, which is the whole point of putting a window. He was in compliance, but he wasn't in support. Watching your policy, does it say you may, or you should, or you shall? You might. Those words are important. Deacons and elders and youth ministry teams have to really be on board. You have to really be the cheerleader. You have to say, yeah, I'm happy to be fingerprinted. You bet that our kids are that important, and I don't have anything to hide. I don't mind being fingerprinted. Kids are that important. I don't mind going through the nuts of stuff. Now, some people say, oh, I had this youthful indiscretion. I had one guy who in college was hungry and stole a turkey. And yes, it showed up. But 30 years later, stealing a turkey in college didn't disqualify him from being a Sunday school teacher in the discussion that was had over his employment. The policies team has to believe in it and work out the hard questions of what if. And once the decision's made, everybody has to support it. Give it the rah-rah. Invite everybody to read it. Talk to people about it. Maybe have some small group sessions and go over some of the things you thought were really important on it. If you haven't written a policy and some of you have, go over it, look at everything, read through it, say what things maybe do we need to look at or change or adjust. Make sure legal overviews it. Most churches either have an attorney or you can tap into the Presbyterian attorney on this stuff to make sure everything you're saying is legal. Have the training, that's what you're all here for. Have a deadline for when you have to have files, when you have to sign stuff, for future training. A lot of churches like to do their training in January or February when the new session comes out. It's just part of what they do in a session retreat, just one of the aspects of it. Have several people that are really in the know, that have really, really embraced having a policy. And they're the ones that go up and say, we just had this policy that we've written, and one of the things I like best about it is blah, 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 blah. We're making that stand in this church, and I'm proud of that. Talk it up. It's important to do that. And be careful not to let all this stuff drag too long. Now I know you already have a policy, and I know I keep saying that, but a lot of churches say, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. I think it was 5 years ago, well, I wasn't in Superior, 6 years ago, every church was required to have a policy. Most of the churches in our presbytery have the policy that is the presbytery policy. That's just the policy that's in their file. And most of them haven't looked at it ever since. Yeah. Material placement. Once you have the policy, make sure you know where it's kept. Have access to papers. I have some things like diagrams and things like that that are important. Make sure phone numbers of who do you call? What's the police number? What's CPS number? What's a pastor's number? Because maybe you don't happen to have that in your cell phone. Somewhere in that book, easy to find. Consider shoe cards in the bathrooms. I think you have them here. Safety cards if you need help, and women can tuck them into their shoes, kids can tuck them into their shoes. It's about the size of a business card, and it's got emergency numbers if you're being abused or if you need help to get up. And it's usually found in women's restrooms and it's handy to have in a youth room too, by the way. But a woman can tuck it in under the tongue of her shoe, and her husband or boyfriend, whoever might be abusing her, can't find it. And it gives her the number she needs to escape an abusive situation. Consider abuse in all kinds of situations. We talked about all different things, and consider that when you make your policy up. It's real easy to focus on child abuse, but as you can see, there's a whole lot that's going on. Considering if it's happening inside the church, it's a member of the church, it's staff on the church, or what happens if it's somebody from outside the church. It's a parent of a kid in your youth group, if they're not a member, all those kinds of things. And then, like I said, make it clear some things are not held in confidence. I always take the stand, if you're hurting yourself or others, I'm going to tell. I'm not going to tell if you're flunking math, but I will tell if I'll go with you to the police, I'll wait for CPS with you, but those things I don't keep secret. Identify the spokesperson for the church. Look into the cost involved. Figure that in as you're doing this. Who pays for fingerprinting? And for a big church, sometimes that's not a big deal. For a small church like mine, that's a really big deal because it's a huge expense. If you have people rotating around, be sure that they're caught, in all the legalities of what to do, and make sure that they will do it. Who's making sure that everybody's been fingerprinted? Whose job is that? And what if they leave that job? Who takes that job? All this blame. Don't make your minister do that. Okay? That's a good job for an elder. Be ready for those that say it happened to me. When you start being active and proactive on this stuff, you're going to have people come up to you and say, it happened to me, and they're going to tell you their stories. It might be 70 years later and it'll still come up. I had a woman come up to me. We were actually making those little bags I was telling you about, and we were talking about a course I had done in this, and she said, yeah, she was in her 80s. She said, yeah, when I was 6, my grandfather abused me, and this, and this, and this, and this. Doesn't go away. She's learned to live with it, she's coped with it, but it doesn't go away.
That brings up a question, which actually has come up now. Isn't it true that in some states they've lifted the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, and an adult comes to talk to you, and their parent, maybe in their 70s or 80s, is still alive,
Yep.
and they say to you, I was sexually abused as a child, you could be obligated to report that.
Yep. And that's Arizona's law.
So,
Technically, yes.
so there's no statute of limitations in
No
Arizona.
statute of limitations on sexual abuse.
But that's now. So the law changed, the statute of limitations changed. So you have to go back to when the incident actually occurred
Okay.
and look and see if there was a statute of limitations at the time of
And it
the
may have been
offense.
that long ago, 70 years ago. It may have been, 7 years
Right,
is
because
often that.
a lot of the statutes of limitations changed in the 80s. They didn't change until the 80s here.
Okay, thank you.
Good, excellent. Consider bringing in professional counseling if you have an event happen in the church. When it happened in Pennsylvania, Dr. Peter and Carol Schreck were family counselors and seminary professors that taught family counseling, and they came in to counsel the church, to help with the victims, and to deal with those of us that work with kids, and to help us, because we were grieving over this. The news hit as we were taking all the kids to the Jersey Shore for their summer camp. And while we were there, a couple of the boys went up to the camp counselors and said, he did it to me too. They were not prepared in any way, shape, or form to deal with that. You need to be prepared. What if somebody comes and says it happened to me? Or it is happening? Bring in counselors if it's extreme cases. We've talked about a wide range of things. Have church meetings, have ways for people to share, and don't hide it. I'm not going to go over, I've got a lot of policy things here, but you have an excellent policy, and so I'm going to just skip over those things. In fact, let's go to slide 89.
Hang on just a sec.
I'm a talker, I'm sorry, but we got to go through.
There you go.
Well, there we are. Annually, every year is a good time to plan when you have these training things. And you should also annually update the list of designated reporters and a listing of persons designated by session to receive the report. Look at those things carefully and look at them every year. Because I know, having been in the presbytery 5 years, a lot of pastors are new. If you call them by name, the name might be the pastor that was here 5 years ago. So you got to think about those things. And there's a problem with policies. And here's the thing, they're usually not fully. Update the list of designated reporters. A designated reporter in the Presbyterian Church, if you are a deacon or an elder, if you work with children, if you are an ordained pastor. Deacons and elders are ordained in the Presbyterian Church, so you are a mandated reporter. Pastors are mandated reporters. Designated reporters might be, I've got somebody that's working in the Sunday school class. Who do they go to in the church to tell this happened? And maybe maybe they go to the senior pastor, maybe they go to an elder that's in charge of this stuff that has taken this on as their carrying part of their ministry. But you never leave somebody that's, a lower, if you will, lower level on the church food chain to handle it alone. So who do they go to? So you have to say, the person that's in charge of this, or what if it's the senior pastor? Then you have to say, who do they go to if it's that person? And that will depend on each individual church, but that might change as churches change and grow. They're usually not enforced, they're usually not kept up, that's policies. So who reports and what gets reported? We've talked about a lot of the things, and I have examples over there, and this church will have a copy of those things, so you can get copies of that if you want to. You have to be practical. The name of who's giving you the information, how you got the information. Well, so-and-so came in and started talking to me about whatever. Details of the conversations that have gone on. Sometimes, if you're really quiet or if you're driving kids, you hear a whole lot of stuff. I was driving some kids and they were talking about where they stashed their pot. That was a phone call I didn't really want to make to their parents, but there are those kinds of things that go on. A description of the event, the time, the place. It was Sunday school before church or after we had had this discussion of something. The name and address of the child, a name and address of the person responsible for the care of the child, and any other information you need to have. If you witness something, you might see something that's inappropriate, and don't leave the kid alone to go and report. It's like, let me go to the office and get that book. No. Have somebody go get the book for you. Have somebody stay with the child while you get it that is trusted, Don't personally confront the alleged or accused violator of the policy. If somebody that violates your policy does something they're not supposed to do, let the powers that be handle it. You report it. The youth leader did this, and they were calling the kids these names. That's not acceptable. But you don't confront them if you're just another youth leader. You take it higher. Allow the senior pastor or the director of youth ministry to provide you with the follow-through and the instructions for reporting the incident to the police, to guardians, to the presbytery, the police department, child protective services. It's part of our job as pastors. Make sure you know who's going to be responsible for communication. And if the senior pastor is accused, or one of the pastors is accused, reports should be addressed using the Book of Order and the Rules of Discipline. I love the Book of Order, maybe the only Presbyterian that does, maybe a couple more of us that do. But it tells you what to do when things go south. When things get bad, you look it up and say, what happens? Who do I call? And he'll tell you who you call. It tells you what you're supposed to do. It's a twofold issue that we deal with. First, there's the legal mandate. That means calling CPS and or the police department. And the second is the ecclesiastical mandate, reporting to the presbytery, especially when staff is involved. But it's really good to let the presbytery know in any case, because they really don't want to hear what's happening in your church on the news. Okay? And a side issue, of course, is reporting to your insurance company when something happens. We want to protect kids and any further future victims from harm. But there's a duty that we wrestle with on keeping confidences, and that can have legal consequences. And I've repeated over and over and over how I feel about that. That is my personal business and my choice to do that. I'm upfront with everybody about that so they know. Other pastors may have other choices in their conscience and feel perfectly wonderful about that, and that's their choice as their pastor also. It's always a good idea to let people know either way. Slide 92, I don't know where we are. Firearm policy. It used to be very popular 10, 15 years ago No firearms on the church property. Check your policies if your policies are old, because that idea and thing is changing. And I'm not giving you advice on what to do about that. I have taken, as many of the pastors in our presbytery have, safety in case of a shooter in churches. Isn't that horrible that we have to take classes on that now? But be clear what your church policy is on it. You know, we live in Arizona, let's get real, okay? I know church organists that are sitting there packing, right? I know pastors that are too. But have a serious review on that. Do the training on what happens if you have an event in your church. Because there's a lot of really good stuff out there and really good training out there. But I will say you might want to look carefully at it. I had an 18-year-old come to a church event and place his unsecured pistol on a desk in an unlocked and accessible office. This was the same 18-year-old who had bullet holes in his car where he had shot and not thought about it. I did not want him having a gun on campus. However, a police officer in my congregation, I'm real happy with that person having a gun. What if there's campus security? So when you say, yes, everybody can, or no, nobody can, think about that. I've even been doing pulpit supply. I've had the pleasure of doing pulpit supply in a lot of churches. A meth addict came in and threatened the elder that was doing greeting with a knife. So for the next couple weeks, I sat there with my cell phone next to me at the pulpit with 911, so all I had to do was press go on it. Be aware of that stuff. Think over, is there a time when it's okay? Is there a time when it's not okay? Does it depend on a situation, or on a particular person, or on an event? Consider having campus training safety training. Think about punishment. What happens if somebody violates one of your rules? And carry it out. And some of that depends on how serious it is. You know, if somebody shows a movie and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't know those words were in it, and shuts it off, is not quite the same as somebody that's showing X-rated flips on something. So, but know where your limitations are. Okay. We have incident reports. We talked a little bit about that. And you can see there's a lot of things that where were they? How old are the kids? Some of this stuff, because you might not necessarily know all those, or the next person. You know, you might know who that kid that's in your Sunday school class is, but the senior pastor doesn't know their name. Or if they do, they don't know how old they are. You know, so you need to do that. Describe what happened. What action did you take? Has it been resolved? You know, has it all been worked out? Were there witnesses? You know, we saw this kid do this or whatever. Who are the witnesses? I have this wonderful sheet that has, I'm going to show you, it's up here, and I used to use it. Wonderful sheet that you can put diagram on. So you mark on there, this bruise was purple, this bruise was yellow, this bruise was green, this is where the bite mark was, any of those kinds of things. This is where they said they were touched. It's really helpful to have a diagram like this. You know, yeah, cigarette burns are something that happens quite often. Don't ask the child leading questions. You know, I shared you know, how'd you get the black eye? Oh, Grandma hit me. Oh, when? What was going on? That's not leading. Don't say, oh, I see you have a black eye. Did Grandma hit you, or was it Mom's boyfriend that did that? Okay. Let the professionals ask the questions. Sometimes the things that you say will give the kid, maybe that's how I should say it, maybe that's the answer I'm supposed to have. So you really love the professionals. You can mess up a criminal investigation if you are leading the child with something. Yes?
I was just going to say that when your kid tells you something, call the police. There is a child advocacy center here in Tucson where they have trained forensic interviewers that their entire job is to talk with the kids. It's all recorded. They have been specially trained on how to do it, and that is what they use in criminal prosecutions. And yes, it can come back to hurt a criminal prosecution if you start asking kids more and more questions.
You don't need to ask the questions. You need to record what they tell you asking, how'd you get the black eye, is, if they said, well, this happened, the baseball hit me or whatever, I've gotten a black eye from falling down because I'm a klutz. But, once you can say, oh, okay, now we're going to see what happened with that. But don't act shocked. What do you mean they touched you there? They're sharing something really, really big with you. And they won't share it if they don't think you can accept what they're going to tell you. They won't share it with you if they think you're going to go, oh no. You don't want to add to their pain or their shame. Use the documentation sheet, mark those things. What does it look like? Oh, it looks like a handprint. It looks like the clothes iron mark. It looks like the cigarette burn. What's it look like to you? Just in what you're looking at as what you can see. In your policy, have a definition of people. Who are your staff? What are their positions? What kinds of jobs do they hold? And you might have all these different jobs in there. Have a reporting procedure. Look at the things and how you're going to be reporting. In general, you want to have all your leaders and anybody working, particularly with kids, willing and able and understanding what they need to do reporting. Above all, don't leave the kids alone. Don't personally confront the perpetrator, and report 24 hours. You got 24 hours to do the report in accordance with the law. 24 hours. So it's not like, well, let's see what happens next week if they come in their lap movement. Anybody who must report and what you're supposed to do. Anybody who works with children and youth. The incident report needs to be filed within 24 hours. If you're not going to get into all that, we're not going to tell them stuff. It should include the precise wording of the outcry of the youth or child. This is what happened. You don't need to elaborate, just precisely this is what they said. Keep quiet about it except to the people that you're supposed to talk to, because the more often you tell the story to other people, it gets translated around and finally it's not truth anymore. And again, you can mess up a legal investigation and get this kid help if you mess it up that way. All the details of the child or youth's first conversation with adult reporting incidents should be recorded verbatim on the incident report and visible mark diagram. What reports are required? The non-paid people, that's the adult volunteers. And once you have given you're the Sunday school teacher, you're not paid, somebody tells you something and you go to whoever you're supposed to go to in your particular church, usually the senior pastor, and you've told them and you filled out the incident report, your responsibility is done. Your responsibility is done with that. If you are an elder and deacon, you are a PCUSA mandated reporter. Paid staff are legally mandated reporters. The deacons and elders, it's because of our church policy, PCUSA policy. But if you're paid staff by Arizona law, you're a mandated reporter. And so regardless of whether you receive the report from a volunteer or from the child or victim, you're a mandated reporter. And you're required to file reports with both the presbytery and the secular authorities. All clergy are mandated reporters. You're supposed to call the child abuse hotline and the local police within 24 hours and give their written report. And if it involves the clergy or paid staff of the church, a report has to be filed with a presbytery pastor in our presbytery and the chair of the presbytery committee on sexual misconduct within 24 hours. They need to be aware of what's going on too. They can also help supply you with support and guidance, and especially if it's somebody that's on staff to help the healing process. And then comes the hard part. You got to notify the child's parents in person. If the alleged perpetrator is one of the child's parents, the non-offending parent should be notified first of the child's disclosure. Leave that up to people at higher pay grades like your senior pastor. Sorry. You don't have to talk to the parents. No, you might have a relationship with those parents and you might want to do some of those things. But work that out with your senior pastor of who's going to talk to the parents about this issue.
Is that within 24 hours as well?
Mm-hmm. You want parents because you don't want that kid to be in an unsafe thing happening, because you don't, and of course, it's always going to depend what the law says 24. In closing, it's been a really long morning, hasn't it? It's been a long week for me too, because I've been kind of immersed in all this ugliness. I find it very important to give these lectures and talks and help churches develop policies and answer questions, but it's really, really hard dealing with case after case and reading things and looking at the law and seeing all the ugliness that's out there. And I know none of you want to go through this every single year. You don't. We wish it would just go away, but it doesn't go away, and it's getting worse. And we, as God's people, are uniquely equipped to step into the fray. We aren't going to stop it. I hate to say that, we aren't going to stop it. It's been going on since David and Bathsheba, okay? He used his power as king to get a pretty woman he saw. You know. She maybe didn't use the best judgment, bathing naked, when the king was walking around. Let's see. It's an old story. We aren't going to stop it. We can help, though, the people that have been affected by it to help them deal with it, and deal with it throughout their entire lives. Because they're not going to forget about it just because 5 years have gone by, or 10 years, or 15 years. We can help them deal with it. We're not going to stop it, but we can minister to those who deal with the impulses that drive this. There are people who haven't done anything yet, but they have those urges, and we can help them with that as well. We aren't going to stop it, but we can trust in God that He will in His good time. We have a few minutes. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah.
I'm an elementary teacher, and I know at my old school, the principal, if a child would come to school and say this happened, a principal could then become, there's some Latin term, but basically the parents, so we don't. What?
In locus parentis.
A locus parentis, yeah. So we don't send the kid back home, the school ends, we're like, oh, hope you're safe tonight. Like the principal can hold on to the kid. Does that apply, like if I have somebody say in my youth group, say, blah, 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 this person did this to me, can then Matt or Bill then become the locals parentis, so we don't have to send that child home, or does that not apply to school?
Technically, they should, in my opinion. That's what you call CPS.
Right.
Yeah, you would call CPS, but then like, for example, like at the school, the 2:30, the bell rings, and that child has to go somewhere.
In that case, if it would of course depend on the situation.
Oh, obviously.
You can have it be here, but if you're going to keep that child here after Sunday school or youth group or something until CPS gets here, have 2 people there.
Oh,
Have
of
2
course,
people
yeah.
with them, especially. But CPS should be there in a very, very short time. My experience has been, it's a matter of half hour, 45 minutes usually, depends, of course,
Yeah, the old concept, there's 2 Latin terms that govern for the state, for the nation. It's called parens patriae, which is a old document that allowed years ago for the state to step in. And so in the case that Ned is talking about, you would definitely want to call the police, CPS, somebody who falls under that parens patriae concept, who is legally able to take over in that particular case.
And the reality is it shouldn't be more than, a very short amount of time. But if they're really in serious danger of something happening, you don't want to send them home.
Yeah.
I think one thing every church should realize, and this happened to me when I went to a church in Charlotte in 2005, a child had been abused in the scouting program in 1963. The church did not know this. Here we are in 2005, we get the phone call from the adult who had been abused as a child, saying that we have to take responsibility and liability for what happened then. So we didn't have any kind of policy. Our wheels began to turn and everything run like this. And we did have to take responsibility and help that person receive counseling and go, hey, this can pop up on any church at any time. Because you don't know what happened 20 years ago in your church. And you have to respond to it appropriately if it does happen.
Matt, one of our church members is an attorney who was appointed by the state of Arizona to act as a liaison between the Catholic Church and the victims for cases that came up 20, 30, 40 years later, which is still happening.
And it does, and that's why there's no statute of limitations on it. So you have to be prepared for all those situations and be ready for them.
Mary Jo, thank you so much.
Thank you for sitting through all this stuff. Let's stand. I have a closing prayer. I want to ask you to hold me up. I did that once and it was a mistake. Because we affirm that all children are a gift of God. You join in. All children are a gift from God, created by God and created good. All children are a gift to the whole of the human community. All children have real faith and gifts for ministry. All children have a right to be children. Therefore, we hope for a world where all children can find a safe place, where all ages, races, genders, creeds, and abilities are recognized, valued, and celebrated, where all adults hear the voices of children and speak with as well as for them. We must remember that Jesus welcomed children and encouraged us to welcome them in His name. Jesus lifted up a child as an example of what the realm of God is like. Amen. May God bless you.
Before you leave, I'm going to ask you to give one more hand applause to Mary Jo and